This is sure to put Ram trucks out of business. With rising inflation rates, cost of living increases that just don't seem to let up and aren't stopping. We're seeing more people having to share bunks and hot sheeting. We see more people living under bridges and in tents than ever. These are indicators that the market is not there. The market cannot be sustained as it currently sits. And all these OEM manufacturers, for example, like Dodge, Ram, Stellantis, and Jeep, have been just looking beyond that. They're living in their own little glass bubble of sorts in a place where they think there's endless supplies of cash. And while they've been living in a little bit of an isolated situation, believing that this money will continue to flow, the reality is that's the small percentage of people that actually have that dollars to spend on that new pickup truck. That percentage of people is shrinking every single day. And so here we are asking the question, with what Ram's doing in this next year, is it enough to keep the business going? In my opinion, not even close. I've heard from customers, I've heard from people, I've certainly heard from lots of viewers that say, I can't afford that. I'm just going to drive my old truck, keep fixing it up, put a new engine in it, redo the brakes, rebuild the front end, and just make it last forever and ever, because the cost of a new truck is cost prohibitive. Now, if some of these manufacturers actually kind of figure that out and put the greed aside and justify and fake justify, supply chain challenges, that's gone. Cost of buying parts, that's gone. I mean, a lot of these dealers, there's multiple ownership groups, might own many different dealerships that are spread out across a nation. It's never usually a single proprietor owning these businesses. So, they're sharing costs from, administrative costs, they're sharing IT, advertising costs. They're sharing a lot of these costs, and these burdens at the dealership level are shared. So a lot of those costs could in fact be sent down to the dealer level, could be sent down to the customer, the buyer. But the OEMs too are getting cocky. They're raising their MSRPs. And have you heard lately that Ram increased their MSRP prices only to quickly revert back when there were some challenges? But the problem is this isn't stopping. And they're not and certainly Ram specifically isn't in a place to actually openly advertise and say, hey, we're giving you a great deal. If you go in there and chisel and hack away, you might get a couple grand off. But they're not really coming forth, they're not forthcoming about it. And honestly, a lot of these vehicles, you can't get deals on. If you want the latest and greatest, you won't get a deal. Have you heard about Ram's new engine configuration? Yeah, you probably won't get a great deal on that inline 6, just because it's new and fresh. So are people going to buy this new Ram, and is it enough to sustain? Well, let's find out. Well, browsing through the 2025 Dodge Ram or Ram configurator, it's pretty clear to me that, yeah, you can start. There's some base trucks at the bottom, but barely has a steering wheel and rubber floors. But if you just need a work truck, that might be the place to look, because quite frankly, for people that want to get to that next level, all they're doing is adding all kinds of technology that they can buy for pennies on the dollar from foreign markets that are supplying some of these parts. The parts are poorly made, they're cheap, they're junk, and again, pennies on the dollar. And then they're flipping that whole module or that card or that feature for thousands of dollars, and they're piecing that up in terms of a package, and you as the consumers are paying way more than these parts are even worth. A vehicle is not a sum of its parts, after all, especially when we're talking about Ram trucks. For example, a new tungsten, when going through this configurator, if you go all in and you spec up fully loaded tungsten Ram for 2025, you could find that it's priced up to $96,000 and almost $500. It's absolutely ludicrous. We're not even talking about the TRX or in those hot specialty off-road versions with the obviously supercharged V8 engines. We're talking about garden variety, luxury oriented, but basically relatively mainstream pickup trucks that your neighbor might buy, your brother might buy, or you might buy. So obviously, companies like Stellantis and Ram, they're not listening to what people are going through. They're not looking outside their glass house. They're clearly not in a place where they're actually understanding what the buyer actually needs. And so while they think they might sell a small percentage of these trucks, and for them it might represent some actual benefit from a profits perspective, clearly the writing's on the wall. People don't have the money for it. So a tungsten, ask yourself these questions. Some features that elevate a tungsten to a top level, essentially a luxury base trim. Yeah, you get 22-inch wheels. Do you need that? You hit a pothole, you bend a rim. It's also going to cost you an exorbitant amount of money to put a new set of skins after they wear out after 25,000 kilometers. Not really a mandatory feature. You don't really need 22-inch wheels, but hey, if you want it, it's available. They also come with front massaging seats. Well, I'll tell you what, Skip all of that, drive my 2003 Dodge Ram, and there's enough shake and vibration in the uneven running of the engine and the motor mounts and the general shake of the vehicle. It's sitting there and it makes you feel like you're getting massaged, and you don't even need to spend $96,000 to buy a tungsten. Get yourself an old 2003 Ram and you can experience the same vibrating seat syndrome. These also come with collision alert and accident avoidance systems. And it also comes with a 540 horsepower inline-six turbocharged Hurricane engine. Like you need that for work, but that's great. If you want it, it's available. So then you probably ask, well, I bet you Ford or GM, they have trucks that cost that much too. And if you ask that question, I tell you, you're probably right. Because if you spec up a fully loaded F-150 or a GMC vehicle, you're going to find that they're all in a very similar spot at the top end of the scale, but Ram does edge out the others. They are more expensive than the other two brands. Conversely, their sales are less than the other two brands by a significant amount, with the F-150 being the biggest winner in sales. But while I truly believe Ram is going to struggle here in years coming up, is the fact even at the bottom end of the spectrum, we spoke of this, those are the work trucks, the trucks that everyday people like you and I are buying. Those are the trucks that we can generally kind of even consider affording. Yes, entry-level vehicle space. But let's compare the three main brands. Ford has a truck that starts around $38,500. GMC also has a truck that starts around $38,800 for a Silverado. And a 1500 Sierra Pro is about $39,000 and change. But the Rams are still higher than the rest of their competitors. The base model tradesman Ram 1500 comes in at a whopping $42,000 and change, clearly about almost $4,000 more at the bottom end of the spectrum when you're talking about base work trucks. So Ram clearly is in a space all their own. They're trying to promote this luxury space, but a lot of people just need a truck to get around. So Ram is the least competitive of the brands, and clearly also the least reliable of the brands historically, puts them in a place that's very awkward, not competitive, and a spot where their business is at risk. So I truly think their business model is a little bit out of whack. And even with the fact that Ram in 2023 saw about 1% decline in terms of overall sales from previous, down to about 44,926 units were pitched in 23. We also anticipate 24 as a transition year, where 25 is a whole new gambit of new engine configurations with obviously the Hurricane engine. Of course, pricing has been readjusted to newfound levels that people just can't afford. And as it stands, currently Ram is 100,000 units less than GMC and 300,000 units away from Ford, making them the poorest selling full-size pickup truck on the market of the big three. So another thing I have to point out in all of this, yes, I do believe Ram's in big trouble. They need to get down to brass tacks. They're clearly ignoring the fact that people are living on the streets, don't have a pot to piss in, they don't have food for their mouths, and they can't feed their kids. Things are struggling these days. And for the mainstream people, the people that use their trucks for work, people that need to get around, use it for a small business, maybe they're an electrician, they're a plumber, they just need to use it to tow the boat. Remember, the majority of the market who uses trucks are northern markets. Northern United States, Canada, are very popular in the truck segment. And as I mentioned, the tradesman you can have for 42 grand, but nobody buys those trucks because when you live in those northern climates, it snows a lot. And when it snows, you need four-wheel drive. So the cheapest four-wheel drive truck you can get from Ram right now is going to be the Rebel Crew 4x4 vehicle, and that's going to come in a whopping $66,500 all in, delivery, destination charges all in. Who can afford a $67,000 truck these days? Not a lot of people that I'm working with or that I know. So clearly they've totally lost touch with their space, their capacity. That's almost like Richard Pryor showing up to do one of his old conventional concerts in front of a group of nuns and priests. It just doesn't get it. They don't understand their market. They certainly don't understand their customer base. And sadly, it doesn't just begin and end with Ram and their business structure that might be going out the window. Definitely check that out. What's going on with Ford and why customers are not buying them? I think that company might be screwed too, so definitely want to check it out. Hope to see each and every one of you on the next one. Have a great day. Bye-bye.